Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Carl Jung. This is Mysterium Coniunctionis. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material, the link for my book where I teach you most of this anyway, and a direct link for consultation with me, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue the second part of the moon with B, the dog. This one's about 10 pages and it'll take about the same amount of time. Alright. This dark side of the moon is hinted at in the ancient invocation to Selene as the dog or bitch in the magic papyri. Footnote 277. Precindas. It is also said that Selene has the voice of a dog. Her confusion with Hecate naturally makes this attribute all the stronger. In the Iliad, Helen calls herself a nasty, mean-minded bitch. Are the pert, wanton maids of Penelope. That it should be borne in mind that Helen did not actually say that. That was something that was written in a story that was probably made up. I have read through the Iliad. Some parts of that might be historical, but for the most part it is probably not. There, it is also said that in the second hour, Helios appears as a dog. 278. Line 1695. In the 12th hour, he appears as a crocodile, the dragon son of the sun. Interesting. This statement is of interest insofar as the Symbolisatio, 279. This term occurs in Chapter 9 of the Dialogus Philosophy of Agdius de Vadis. Symbolisatio is the drawing of parallels and analogies, in brief, an amplification, described by Clement of Alexandria as symbolic interpretation. This statement is of interest insofar as the symbolizatio by the dog, footnote 280. In the history of symbols, the dog is distinguished by an uncommonly wide range of associations which I will not attempt to exhaust here. The Gnostic parallel, Gnosis Canis, is reflected in the Christian one, Christus Canis. Handed down in the formula, gentle to the elect, terrible to the reprobate. Really? Now, if you were unaware, I am not a Christian. Right? I used to be, I am no longer, because I did a Bible study. That is the pathway which led here. But, right, you're already messing up with the Gnostic parallel of Gnosis Canis, or Logos Canis, and Christus Canis, right? Christ was not the representative of the Logos in its entirety. We have discussed that quite extensively. If that is confusing, fall back to any of the previous videos from this particular study. But if you are going to claim that, right, gentle to the elect but terrible to the reprobate, is that the teachings of Christ? Is that what he went out and preached? Is that what he was physically doing, being terrible to the reprobate? The Samaritan, the woman at the well, he was without sin, cast the first stone. The sinner on the cross next to him, saying, "You'll see me in my kingdom today." He was terrible to the reprobate, right? Really? Like, you cannot make that. You can make that analogy for the church. You can absolutely make that analogy for the church, because the Catholic Church, in particular, was very terrible to the reprobate, which was anybody that did not agree with what they said, right? Christianity spread by the sword. And so, gentle to the elect, terrible to the reprobate is exactly what you would expect from a tyrant. That fits the church, but it does not fit Christ. A true pastor. St. Gregory says, "All what others are called the watchdogs of this flock, save the holy doctors." Also to be borne in mind is the Indian dog, a quadruped of the earth, but a fish in water. This ability to change its shape makes it an allegory of St. Paul. All this and more can be found in Pencilius, in the hieroglyphics of Hieropolis. Like, the Indian dog is obviously an allegory for St. Paul, who was never in India at all. And this Indian dog probably, I'm not familiar with the analogy, but this probably predates Paul by a good bit. And that is a common theme. And we won't even get into Paul. In the hieroglyphics of Harapolo, emphasis is laid on the dog's power to spread infection, especially rabies and diseases of the spleen. Because of its rich symbolic context, the dog is an apt synonym for the transforming substance. By the dog entered Western alchemy through Khalid's Liber Secretorium, originally perhaps an Arabic treatise. All similar passages that I could find go back directly or indirectly to Khalid. 281. Khalid ibn Yazid, an Umayyad prince. The Liber Secretorium is described to him. The text is quoted in Theatrica Chemicum. The original passage runs, Hermes, footnote 282, one of the many Hermes quotations whose origins are obscure. And the quotations of Hermes span a couple thousand years. Right? It was obviously not one single person, but many people assuming the name of when they said the things. And that is not even something that is up for debate. Hermes said, My son, take a Khorassan dog and an Armenian bitch. Join them together, and they will beget a dog of celestial hue. And if ever he is thirsty, give him seawater to drink, for he will guard your friend, and he will guard you from your enemy. And he will help you wherever you may be, always being with you. In this world and in the next. And by dog and bitch, Hermes meant things which preserve bodies from burning and from the heat of the fire. 283. That is from another reference. That doesn't make any sense, right? I do not know what a Khorassan dog is. Let's see if we can get a reference on that, right? We'll pop it out real quick just to see what happens. A band from Ottawa, no, that is not going to be right. Yeah, it's not showing up with anything, right? Yeah, it's not showing anything. I don't know what that is, right? Khorassan is a reference that I am not familiar with. Armenian, I do know Armenia, right? And so, but no matter what you do, you will not, well, I guess you could breed a blue healer, right? That would kind of be a celestial hue, but not really. Or maybe black. But if that's what you're talking about, that's definitely possible. I got one of them myself, right? I got a black dog. I mean, she is a gyp. She is a mutt, right? She is an amalgamation. She didn't come from Khorassan in Armenia. Now, as an allegory, which this almost certainly is, okay, fine. But the key is not here. We do not have the key as to what Khorassan is. It may be referenced in the original source material for this Hermes quote, but there is no understanding of it given in here what Khorassan dog is or an Armenian bitch, right? Even the celestial hue can be taken for a lot of things. There is a lot of different colors that appear in the sky. Right? Black is the predominant one in night. That is the void. That would definitely fit with the moon motif. That would fit with the logos, right? The void being one half of the logos. And so, or the prima materia, the thing from which logos activates and drives. But there is no key in here, right? If you knew the key, then maybe you can unlock it, but it's not in here. If he is thirsty, give him seawater to drink. That would kill pretty much any living animal that is not from the sea. He will guard your friend, and he will guard you from your enemy. All of this has no real reference in what we are talking about. Some of the quotations are taken from the original text. Others are from the variant in the Rosarium, which runs, Haley, philosopher and king of Arabia, says in his secret, take a Cotanian dog and an Armenian bitch, join them together, and they will beget you a puppy of celestial hue. All right, let's look at 284. That is from the Psychology of Transference, so that is not going to be good for a key either. And again, I have absolutely I've at least heard this word Khorassan. I don't remember where, but I've heard it. This Cotanian, I don't even know what that it would be at all. And again, this celestial hue is, right, we do not have a key here. And that puppy will guard you in your house from the beginning, in this world and in the next. 285. And that is from Theatrica Chemicum. As explanatory parallels, the Rosarium mentions the union of the white and red, and cites Senior. The red slave has wedded the white woman. It is clear that the mating must refer to the royal marriage of Sol and Luna. We've already talked about how black is going to be the better representative of this. Right? The void being the infinite darkness, being black, is going to be better than red. The theriomorphic form of Sol as lion and dog, and of Luna as a bitch, shows that there is an aspect of both luminaries which justifies the need for a symbolizatio in animal form. That is to say, the two luminaries are, in a sense, animals or appetites, although, as we have seen, the potentiae sensuales are ascribed only to Luna. There is, however, also a Sol Niger, who, significantly enough, is contrasted with the daytime sun and clearly distinguished from it. This advantage is not shared by Luna because she is obviously sometimes bright and sometimes dark. It's because Luna is only the representative of the void, and the void is where she resides. Psychologically, this means that consciousness, by its very nature, distinguishes itself from its shadow, whereas the unconscious is not only contaminated with its own negative side, but is burdened with the shadow cast off from the conscious mind. Although the solar animals, the lion and the eagle, are nobler than the bitch, they are nevertheless animals and beasts of prey at that, which means that even our sun-like consciousness has its dangerous animals. Or, if Sol is the spirit and Luna the body, the spirit may be corrupted by pride or concupiscence, a fact which we are inclined to overlook in our one-sided admiration of the spirit. Khalid's son of the dog is the same as the much-extolled son of the philosophers. The ambiguity of this figure is thus stressed. It is at once bright as day and dark as night. Again, the logos, white and black, light and dark, positive and negative, creative and destructive, masculine and feminine. I have a better grasp on this, I do believe. I'm not trying to be heady about it, but a perfect coincidentia oppositorium, expressing the divine nature of the self. This thought, which seems an impossible one for our Christian feelings, yes it does, is nevertheless so logical and so irresistible that, by however strange and devious a route it forced its way into alchemy, it was not strange and devious. It is absolutely understandably intrinsic. Right? It is absolutely inextricable from the understanding of alchemy that both of these forces need to be used. There is no way around that to practically apply this. And because it is a natural truth, it is not at all surprising that it became articulate very much earlier. We are told in the Elenchos of Hippolytus that, according to Aratus, Cynosura, 286, this word means dog's tail and denotes the constellation of the little bear. Why not the little dog if it is a dog's tail? Yes, Aratus, Cynosura, is the little bear, the second creation, the small, narrow way. Those are not the same things at all. 287. Perhaps a reference to Matthew 7:14. Straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life. That is close, right? Again, the Gospels pull from true things as well as some made-up things, and this is one of the true things. Straight is the gate. Narrow is the way. Most people will not attain it. It requires self-discipline. That does not mean that you cannot mess up. It means that you have to be correctable, and for most people, that is simply not a thing. Right? But the little bear is a constellation in the sky, right? Ursa Minor. The second creation would be Earth, named the first creation being all things. The second creation actually would probably be Logos, right? First, God decided to become and limited himself into the finite, becoming the spirit, but that was in stasis. First creation. And then he said, I am the light, and became the light, and the light was good. Second creation. Void, stasis, logos, motion. And right, the small narrow way is the joining together of the two. And not the great bear, for it leads backward, but guides those who follow it forward to the straight way, being the tail of the dog. For the logos is a dog who guards and protects the sheep against the wiles of the wolves, and chases the wild beasts from creation and slays them and begets all things. This part is true, right? Now, this is kind of true, right? He protects the sheep against the wiles of the werewolves. That would be the intuition that something is happening. Let's get out of here. That would be it, but it was not a literal protection at all. Beginning this and slays them, right then. For scion, they say, means the begetter, 288. 288 is from melinchos. This word means to be pregnant, also beget. The related verb, this word, means to kiss. Aratus associates the dog with the growth of plants and continues. But with the rising of the dog star, the living are distinguished by the dog from the dead, and for in truth, everything withers that has not taken root. This dog, they say, being a certain divine logos, has been established judge of the quick and the dead. And as the dog is seen to be the star of the plants, so is the logos, they say, in respect of the heavenly plants, which are men. For this reason, the second creation, Sinosauros, stands in heaven as an image of this rational creature, as the logos. That absolutely works, didn't I just say that? But between the two creations stretches the dragon, hindering anything of the great creation from entering the lesser, and watching over everything that exists in the great creation, like the kneeler. 289. 289 says, "Oh, the kneeler is the constellation of Hercules." Interesting. Like the kneeler, observing how and in what manner each thing exists in the lesser creation. Khalid's Phyllis Canis, 290. 290 says, "For Canis as synonym for the lapis, see Lagnius Harmonia Chemica," from the Theatrica Chemicum. Khalid's Phyllis Canis is of celestial hue, an indication of its heavenly origin from the great luminaries. The blue color or likeness to a dog, 291. Wendland has this. This is conjecture. Okay. The blue color or likeness to a dog is also attributed to the woman who in Hippolytus is described as 292. 292 says, "One conjecture is another Greek." Okay, so we don't have anything on that. "Who is pursued by a gray-haired, winged, ichthyophallic old man. He is named Flowing Light." Well, imagine that. The void is chased by flowing light? Really? Would that be a change? I guess it would. That would be going from the void, stasis, beginning, into logos, movement, creation. And she is, which means the Dakwada, 293. 293 says, from Melinchios. Behind these figures may be discerned a Coniunctio, Solis et Lunae, both the sun and the new moon appearing in their unfavorable aspect. Here, too, there arises between them the harmony of an intermediary spirit, roughly corresponding to the position of the Phyllis Philosophorum. 293a is a paragraph citation. Khalid's Phyllis plays the role of a guiding spirit or familiar, whose invocation by magic is so typical of the Heronite texts. A parallel to the dog spirit is the poodle in Faust, who out of whom Mephistopheles emerges as the familiar of Faust, the alchemist. In this connection, I would like to mention the incest dream of a woman patient. Two dogs were copulating. The male went headfirst into the female and disappeared into her belly. That is not an incest. Okay, 294. The motif of disappearance occurs in the second version of Gabricus, Behemoth, and in the submersion of the sun. Right? This is not intrinsically incestuous. There is nothing in this, in fact, to even say that it would be. Right? It went head first into the female, was disappearing into your lusts. It is an obvious copulation for me. Right? Now, maybe it's not for other people, but in dream interpretation, the disappearing is going into, disappearing into, right? He went into and disappeared, that is, a feeling of helplessness, hopelessness, and being lost. Nothing at all to do with incest. Theriomorphic symbolism is always an indication of a psychic process occurring on an animal level. In example, the instinctual sphere. The dream depicts a reverse birth as the goal of a sexual act. This archetypal situation underlies the incest motif in general and was present in modern man long before any consciousness of it. And again, I stand on that is not a good interpretation for that at all. The archetype of incest is also at the back of the primitive notion that the father is reborn from the son. Or genetics occur, and when you have a child, normally, if you have a male child, it resembles the father. I mean, at least the first one. And of the hierogamos of the mother and son in its pagan and Christian form. 295. The same archetype forms in the background of Nicodemus' dialogue in John 3. And that is probably not correct either. It signifies the highest and lowest, the brightest and darkest. Again, that is not incestuous. Right? That is the logos. That is light and dark, creation, destruction, masculine and feminine. That is the only hermaphroditic thing, right? This again is not incest, right? At this point in time, he was in contention with Freud. They were having their things, and both of them seemed to focus on this entirely too much. The best and the most detestable. It represents the pattern of renewal and rebirth, the endless creation and disappearance of symbolic figures, and again, my belief fits that a whole lot better than his. The motif of the dog is a necessary counterbalance to the excessively praised light nature of the stone. Apart from the saying of Khalid, there is still another aspect of the dog, of which, however, we find only sporadic hints in the literature. One such passage occurs in the Duratione Confessiandi Lapidis Philosophicae of Laurentius Ventura, 296, of the ancient Venetian physician of the 16th century. Therefore, pull down the house, destroy the walls, extract therefrom the purest juice. 297. The text has saku, and could therefore mean extract the most pure with the juice and blood. The purest juice with the blood, and cook, that thou mayest eat. Wherefore, Arnaldus said in the Book of Secrets, 298, 298 is going to be Schmeider, mentions of a manuscript of Arnaldus de Villanova, De Secretis Naturae, and so does de Fresnoi, History de la Philosophique Hermétique. Wherefore, Arnaldus saith in the Book of Secrets, purify the stone, grind the door to powder, tear the bits to pieces, choose the tender flesh, and thou wilt have the best thing. In the one thing are hidden all parts, in it all metals shine. Of these pots, 2 are the artificers, 2 are the vessels, 2 are the times, 2 are the fruits, 2 are the ends, and 1 the salvation. 299. Theatrica chemicum. And again, I'm going to point out that this fits me better. Right? And one thing are hidden all parts. Yes, the spirit has all things hidden within it. Right? In it all metals shine. Again, yes. Of these parts, 2 are the artificers, light and dark, creation, destruction. 2 are the vessels, exact same thing. 2 the times, 2 the fruits, 2 the ends, and the combination of them is the salvation. Confirmation bias acknowledged, right? This is what I would expect to see, and so I may be just seeing it, but it is apparent to me. This text abounds in obscurities. In the preceding section, Ventura discusses the unity of the Lapis and the Medicina, mentioning the axioms, introduce nothing alien, and nothing from outside. 300. That is an oft-repeated saying that is in Latin, with quotations from Geber, the Turba, and the Thesaurus Thesaurium of Arnaldus. 301. And is just a reference. Then he turns to the superfluities to be removed. 302. Superflua removenita, an equally popular phrase. That which is not necessary to be removed is exactly how you go about internal alchemy. That is how you do your shadow work to incorporate this and that. And introduce nothing alien, nothing from outside. That is internal reflection. The lapis, he says, is by nature most pure. It is therefore sufficiently purified when it is let out of its proper house and enclosed in an alien house. The text continues. In the proper house, the flying bird is begotten. In the alien house, the tincturing stone. Footnote 303. The idea of the house may have derived originally from astrology. Here, the house means the matrix of the substance, but as domus aliena, it means the chemical vessel, for instance, the domus vitrea, house of glass. The flying bird is a gas that issues from the matrix. The stone, on the other hand, signifies the substance, which does not leave its house like a gas, but must be transferred to another vessel. The gas, spirit, is invisible and feminine by nature, and therefore belongs to the unconscious sphere, where the substance is visible and tangible, more real, as it were. It is masculine, and belongs to the conscious sphere in a man. Accordingly, the domus alienea could be interpreted as consciousness, and the domus propria as the unconscious. The two flying birds, 304. In the separatio, one of the birds can fly, the other not. The unio produces the winged hermaphrodite. Again, above and below would be flying and not, combining the two together into one, making the hermaphrodite. The two flying birds hop onto the tables and heads of the kings, 305. Perhaps the only parallel to this is in Senior. And the ravens will come flying and fall upon it. The idea is obviously that the birds share the king's meal, a possible influence here being the marriage of the king's son. Matthew 22. And the marriage of the Lamb, Revelation 19. Rex always signifies the sun, while the king's table signifies the bright world of day. An example, consciousness, in and by which the contents of the unconscious, the birds, are recognized. These are the fishes and birds that bring the stone. The two flying birds hop onto the tables and heads of the kings because both the feather bird and the plucked, 306, variants of the birds flying and without wings. For the plucked bird, see Allegory super turbum. Take a croc crowned with a red comb and pluck it alive. That is terrible advice. Have thus given us this visible art. And I say that because Cornelius Agrippa was absolutely full of that kind of ridiculous shit that should not be followed at all. There is at no point in time doing any of this work where you should be torturing an animal in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. If you are removing things from an animal in order to do magic, you are doing it wrong. Have given us this visible art and cannot relinquish the society of men. 308. Wait, we missed 307. Where was that? The visible art was 307. The two birds are luminaries, Sol and Luna, or their spirits. I agree. One bird is male and without wings, the other female and winged. That would be the exact opposite. Right, the male being the as above, the white penetrative power, the feminine being the as below, black absorptive power. One would be flying, one would be not. The one that is flying would be the masculine, that is the white. Right, the one that penetrates, the one that you can add. When bound together as collegiate, they represent the Coniunctio. They are the parents of the lapis, which is practically identical with ars nostra, since it is an artificum. And I will point out once again that to me the lapis is the heart, which is indeed the as above trinity and the as below trinity, bound together through the forces in perfect balance. 308. Hominium consortia relinquere nescit. In other words, they remain with men, which reminds us of Clede's always being with you. The birds are personified contents of unconscious. Once they are made conscious, cannot become unconscious again. I absolutely agree with that, with my understanding. As we know, an essential if not decisive part of any analytical treatment is based on the fact that conscious realization generally brings about a psychic change. The Father, 309, Soul as the day star. The Father of the art urges the indolent to work. Its Mother, 310, Luna as the mother of the living and mistress of the night, nourishes the sons who are exhausted by their labors and quickens and adorns their weary limbs. Then follows the passage, therefore pull down the house, etc. If the reader has perused the foregoing passage with the footnotes, he will see that these instructions are the typical alchemical procedure for extracting the spirit or soul, and thus for bringing unconscious contents to consciousness. During the solutio, separatio, and extractio, the succus lunaire, juice of the moon plant, blood, or aqua permanens is either applied or extracted. Now, this would be, to me, the melding together of the forces. The electromagnetics would be the part that moves, right? The flowing. And so this is probably, in his interpretation, describing the physicality of alchemy. For me, this is going to be the internal part, right? Extracting the spirit and soul can be applied to the physicality of alchemy, but it can also be applied to yourself as well. This liquid comes from the unconscious, but is not always the authentic content of it. Often, it is more an effect of the unconscious on the conscious mind. The psychiatrist knows it as the indirect effect of constellated unconscious contents, which attracts or diverts attention to the unconscious and causes it to be assimilated. This process can be observed not only in the gradual formation of hypochondriac obsessions, phobias, and delusions, but also in dreams, fantasies, and creative activities when an unconscious content enforces the application of attention. This is the succus vitae, 311. The succus vitae is once more the aqua permanens, which, remarkably enough, is also designated dog. Yeah, the logos would be. Right? The aqua permanens, as a passage of the Opus Proclarium of Valentinius shows, of the water, which is called dog of the balsam or virgin's milk, or quicksilver, or soul, or wind, or the dragon's tail. This is the succus vitae, the blood, the vital participation which the patient unconsciously forces on the analyst to, and without which no real therapeutic help can be achieved. The attention given to the unconscious has the effect of incubation, brooding, 312. The arcane substance is frequently likened to an egg. See the treatise Concerning the Egg, Berthelot, where the equivalents are the brainstone, the stone that is no stone, and the image of the world, as in the turba and numerous other places. A brooding over the slow fire needed in the initial stages of the work. 313. See the frequent direction on a slow fire. Hence the frequent use of the terms decatio, digestio, putrefactio, solutio. It is really as if attention warmed the unconscious and activated it, thereby breaking down the barriers that separate it from consciousness. In order to set free the contents hidden in the house, 314, as stated above, the term domus is often used. Domus theosauria, treasure house, denotes the place where the arcanum is found, or else it is the chemical vessel or furnace, right? Where do you live in your vitria? Inside of your body. Is that right? Yes, that is right. In order to set free the contents hidden in the house of the unconscious, anima incompendibus, the matrix must be opened. My goodness. The matrix would be a double helix pattern. I wonder if maybe we have made reference to a double helix pattern several times. Yes, we have. This matrix is the canicula, the moon bitch, who carries in her belly that part of the personality which is felt to be essential, just as Baia did to Gavricus. She is the vessel which must be broken asunder in order to extract the precious content, the tender flesh. 315. Caro, flesh, is the name for the arcane substance, especially when it is vivified. The consilicaniwaga, that glow receiveth the flesh, in example, the coagulation, and the blood, in example, the tincture. Dorn reveals the reason for this in his Specfel, Theatrica Chemica. Hence we understand the philosophical transmutations. Do we not know that the pure substance of bread and wine is transformed into flesh and blood? It is not. Travansius, the chemico miraculo, is equally clear when he says of the king, and now he gives his red and bleeding flesh to be eaten by us all. It is terrible. In Congreye's Paracelsi, Dorn says that the medicament can be made more than perfect through its own flesh and blood, in agreement with the above quotation from the Concilium. That is not the same. Right? What came from the Concilium is he gives his red and bleeding flesh to be eaten, right? And can be made more perfect through its own flesh and blood is not the same as eating it. It's just not. A quotation from Malcolmek in Rossville says of the lapis, "It grows from the flesh and blood." Often we come across the fat flesh, as in a quotation from Pseudo-Aristotle in Milius. "Son, you must take of the fatter flesh," and "eat a morsel of fat flesh," a quotation from Arnaldus de Villanova. Caro is an allusion to the fleshy nature of man, which is tinctured by the opus, the Liber Platonis Quatorum. Emphasizes this, and also the importance of having knowledge of the gross, disordered, fleshy body, which is the burden of nature and reaches to the simple soul. The animam simplicium comes close to Plato's eternal idea. The tender flesh, for this is the one thing on which the whole work turns. And she is the vessel which must be broken asunder in order to extract the precious content. That would be the ego. For this is the one thing on which the whole work turns, right? That is doing the shadow work. That is going internal and doing the reflection that is required. And you are breaking apart your own understanding. In this one thing, all parts of the work are contained. 316. Arnaldus de Villanova lays stress on the oneness of the stone. For there is one stone, one medicine, to which nothing from outside is added, nor is it diminished, save that the superfluities are removed. Again, the heart is even more emphatic. One the stone, one the medicament, one the vessel, one the procedure, one the disposition. Of these parts, two are the artificers, who in the symbolical realm are Sol and Luna, in the human, the adept and his soror mystica. 317. Classic pairs are Magus and Helen. Zosimos and Theosebia, Nicholas Flamel and Perenelle. Mr. South and his daughter, Mrs. Atwood, author of a suggestive inquiry into the Hermetic mystery. A good account of Flamel's career can be found in Larguier, Les Fusillés de la d'Or Nicolas Flamel. The Mutus Liber of Altus, recently reprinted, represents the Mysterium Solus et Lunae as an alchemical operation between man and wife in a series of pictures. That such an abstruse and, aesthetically speaking, far from commendable book should be reprinted in the 20th century is proof of the psyche's secret and quite a rational participation in its own mysterium. I have attempted to describe the psychology of these relationships in my Psychology of the Transference. Right. In the human, the adept and his soror mystica, and in the psychological realm, the masculine consciousness and the feminine unconscious, anima. The two vessels are again Sol and Luna, again the upper and lower. 318. See the illustrations in Muta Sleeper where this motif is well represented. The two times are probably the two main divisions of the work. Opus ad album et al rubium. 319. The opus is to be performed at certain fixed symbolical times. For example, the Arcanum Hermetica Philosophicae opus says, "For the first work towards the whiteness must be brought to an end in the house of the moon, and the second in the house of Mercury. The first work towards the redness should end in the second house of Venus. The latter terminates in the second royal throne of Jove, wherefrom our most mighty king receives his crown adorned with precious stones. This again to me is internal work, right? There is astrology, it is related to the stars, but the symbology can be applied to you as well. There are 7 points that are referenced up there. There are 7 points referenced inside of you. There are the light and dark principles expressed up there. They are also expressed within you that you need to bring balance to. And by doing so, you go through each of the houses, right? The house of the moon can be the house of the base, right? That would be the void, the understanding thereof. The house of the Mercury could be the sacral, right? That may not be, but it could be, right? I do not know the literal, but that's probably what they're talking about. Besides this time coordination, there are a number of others. The Coniunctio Coniunctionis says, the white stone begins to appear at sunset on the face of the waters, hiding itself until midnight, and thereafter it inclines towards the deep. But the red works contrariwise, for it begins to rise above the waters at sunrise, and thereafter descends into the deep. Are you kidding me? This is the moon and the sun, right? The white stone appears at sunset on the face of the waters. Now, hiding itself till midnight is an allegory, but that is the void. And thereafter it inclines towards the deep, so it goes up till midnight and it comes down. Right? But the red work contrary-wise, it rises at sunrise and thereafter descends into the deep. Maybe I am just too simple. The former is the opus lunae, the latter the opus solis. Okay, so I am in agreement. 320. C. Senior, De Chemica. His account is not altogether clear on this point, which, as he himself admits, is due to the obscurities of the whole procedure. On page 28, he says, and the second work is the albification and the rubification, and the sages have brought these two works together in one. When they speak of the one, they speak of the other also, and hence their writings seemed to readers to be contradictory. You know what I'm going to say, right? You know what I'm going to say, right? Confirmation bias acknowledged? That is what I'm going to say, because this is exactly what I have been talking about all day today and all week this week. I mean, this is exactly what I would expect to see. I'm not surprised that there is confusion about it, because they were trying to read something in the wrong way. But this, the two works together, the sages have brought these two works together in one. Yes, the light and the dark working together into one is something that you do at the same time. Now, this timing part of it, that's a little bit weird to me, because there is no specific time, but as an allegory it can work, right? The first work must be brought to an end with the house of the moon, right? And that can be the internal houses, or it could be just a timing thing, right? Do it at this time of the day. That part is not clear. To me, the timing does not matter. Now, there is an influence by the moon. We discussed that quite extensively yesterday, where the word lunatic comes from. So there might be a timing issue that I am unaware of. But the works that I have done, the actual physical healing that has manifested in my life, that did not depend on me doing this on any particular day, in any particular fashion, following any particular script. Right? It was all internal, instinctual things that I did. All right, back to the text. Psychologically, they correspond to the constellation of unconscious contents in the first part of the analytical process, and to the integration of these contents in actual life. The two fruits, 321. The result of the opus is often called its fruit, as in the turba. Why hast thou ceased to speak of the tree, and of the fruit whereof he that eateth shall never hunger? This passage is probably not without reference to John 6. Well, we have not done the allegory of the Bible. That might be a thing that I might need to return to, but honestly, I'm not wanting to. But once you do this, like earlier when it said you cannot go back, that is true. Once this awakens, there is no going back. Once you have the truth, you cannot go back to the lie. That is why I'm so very reticent to pick up the Bible as the allegory. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. That is to the manifestation efforts. The turbo continues. I say that old man ceases not to eat of the fruits of that tree until that old man becomes a youth, and the father is become the son. It is questionable whether this is a Christian interpolation. Yeah, you're right. The two fruits are the fruit of the sun and moon tree. 322. There are many pictures of the arbor philosophica and patristic language. It is the fruitful tree which is to be nourished in our hearts. Confirmation bias acknowledged, like the vine in the Eastern Church. Thou, prophet of God, art seen as a mighty vine, filling the whole world with divine words, as with fruits. I am the fruitful vine. Aurora, too, likewise confers to John 15, 1 and 5. Know ye not that all holy writing is in parables? Yes, yes, yes. For Christ followed the same practice and said, I am the true vine. See also the philosophical tree. I emphasize that 3 times for a reason. What else is a holy writing? The entirety of what? Okay. Got you? You with me? Okay. The fruits of the sun and moon tree, the gold and silver, or the reborn and sublimated Sol and Luna. The psychological parallel is the transformation of both the unconscious and the conscious, a fact known to everyone who methodically has it out with the unconscious. Absolute agreement. The two ends or goals are these transformations. Again agreed. But the salvation is one, just as the thing is one. It is the same thing at the beginning as at the end. It was always there, and yet it appears only at the end. This thing is the self, the indescribable totality, which, though it is inconceivable and irrepresentable, is nonetheless necessary as an intuitive concept. Empirically, we can establish no more than that the ego is surrounded on all sides by an unconscious factor. That is true. You can take a good bit of control of those things, right? Once you begin the self-reflection work, these unconscious things that surround your consciousness become part of your consciousness. And once you are aware that there is a trigger, then you can become aware of how to deal with the trigger. That is the same thing. I mean, it is surrounded on all sides by an unconscious factor, but the fruit of this particular work is being able to take control of that. Proof of this is afforded by the association experiment, which gives a graphic demonstration of the frequent failure of the ego and its will. The psyche is an equation that cannot be solved without the factor of the unconscious. It is a totality, which includes both the empirical ego and its transconscious foundation. There is still another function of the dog in alchemy which has to be considered. In the introitus apertus of Philathea, we find the following passage. This chameleon is the infant hermaphrodite who is infected from his very cradle by the bite of the rapid Coracine dog, whereby he is maddened and rages with perpetual hydrophobia. Nay, though of all natural things water is the closest to him, yet he is terrified of it and flees from it. O fate! Yet in the grove of Diana there is a pair of doves which assuage his raving madness. Then will the impatient, swarthy, rabid dog, that he may suffer no return of his hydrophobia and perish, drowned in the waters, come to the surface half suffocated. But do thou chase him off with pails of water and blows, and keep him at a distance, and the darkness will disappear. When the moon is at the full, give him wings, and he will fly away as an eagle, leaving Diana's birds dead behind him. 323. That's from the Hermetica. Here, the connection with the moon tells us that the dark, dangerous, rabid dog changes into an eagle at the time of the plenilunium. That's a hard word. His darkness disappears and becomes a solar animal. We may therefore assume that his sickness was at its worst, the novilunium. It is clear that this refers to a psychic disturbance. 324. The spagyrics extract from the moon itself an oil against falling sickness and all affections of the brain. Okay, now, this does not work as a literal, right? From the moon itself, you will not do. Right now, there is the understanding that the moon created the dew. That was not true, but the collection of the dew was a process that was attributed to extracting from the moon, and so that kind of works, but not really. I mean, it is understandable why they said it, but it does not really work. But if you extract from the moon itself, there is an oil. And it is against the affections of the brain. It is against falling sickness, kind of. It is how I have affected the change within myself, the manifestation of healing that has taken place. And so it makes sense to me in my understanding, but not in the physical alchemy way. Refers to a psychic disturbance, which at one stage also infected the infant hermaphrodite. Probably that too occurred at the novolunium. 325. Not only does Luna cause moon sickness, she herself is sick or ailing. One sickness is the combustible sulfur, which prevents her from staying in the mixture. The other is excessive cold and dampness. Hollandus. Probably that too occurred at the novolunium. In example, the stage of Negretto. Just how the mad dog with its terror of water got into the water at all is not clear, unless perhaps it was in the aqua inferiores from the beginning. The text is preceded by the remark, and no, right? That's just an absolute no. That is not, unless it was in the water for beginning, is completely against the thing that was described in what we read, right? It was on the land, and then it went to the garden, and then there were doves, and then it was in the water. The text is preceded by the remark, whence will come the chameleon, or our chaos, in which all secrets are hid in their potential state? The chaos, as prima materia, is identical with the waters of the beginning. I am in agreement with that, right? The chaos would be the logos. That is the light which penetrates, the disorganization even, right? When there was the spirit in stasis, all was organized. Everything was exactly where it was. Right? And then came the chaos, the speaking of I am the light, and became the light, and it was good. And then motion began. Right? That would be chaos, setting into motion the combination of things as it happens to happen by thermic discharge. All of that makes sense to me in my understanding. According to Olympodorus, lead, also the prima materia, contains a demon that drives the adept mad. 326. The fall into madness through ignorance. Right now, lead contains a demon that drives the adept mad is true. Right? If you were unaware, we have decided it is not a good idea to paint your house in lead. Right? Lead makes paint bright. It makes it nice and shiny. It even makes your food taste good. But it'll kill you. It'll drive you insane, and then it will kill you. It will cause massive organ failure on a catastrophic level within you. That is a true thing. Contains a demon that drives the adept mad. Now, interestingly enough, when this was written, we had not yet quite made that discovery. We had Mad Hatters. We didn't understand what that was, but shortly after World War II, we got a very good understanding about that, and we changed a whole lot about our life. We even took lead out of the fuel that we burn, even though it was more efficient to have it in there. I mean, lead has an actual physical problem with the body. It's probably not the prima materia. Curiously enough, Po Yang, a Chinese alchemist of the 2nd century, compares lead to a madman clothed in rags. And again, lead makes you insane. Isis, this is footnote 327. On page 238, Po Yang describes this madness that attacks the adept, the philosophical tree. Elsewhere, Olympodorus speaks of the one cursed by God who dwells in the black earth. This is the mole, which, as Olympodorus relates from a Hermetic book, had once been a man who divulged the mysteries of the sun and was therefore cursed by God and made blind. He knew the shape of the sun as it was. 328. Berthelot. An alchemist would say that he knew the secret of gold making. Physiologically, it would mean that he knew about the transformation of consciousness, but that it was abortive, so that instead of being illuminated, he fell into deeper darkness. And if you do this, if you stop the process, you will fall into deeper darkness. And that's why one of the warnings that I give in this book is that if you are not prepared to continue, do not begin. Back to the text. It is not difficult to discern in these illusions the dangers, real or imaginary, which are connected with the unconscious. In this respect, the unconscious has a bad reputation, not so much because it is dangerous in itself, as because there are cases of latent psychosis, which need only a slight stimulus to break out in all their catastrophic manifestations. An anamnesis, or the touching of a complex, may be sufficient for this. But the unconscious is also feared by those whose conscious attitude is at odds with their true nature. Naturally, their dreams will then assume an unpleasant and threatening form. You might even disappear. For if nature is violated, she takes her revenge. In itself, the unconscious is neutral, and its normal function is to compensate the conscious position. In it, the opposites slumber side by side. They are wrenched apart only by the activity of the conscious mind, and the more one-sided and cramped the conscious standpoint is, the more painful or dangerous will be the unconscious reaction. There is no danger from this sphere of conscious life, has a solid foundation, but if consciousness is cramped and obstinately one-sided, and there is a weakness of judgment, then the approach or invasion of the unconscious can cause confusion and panic, or a dangerous inflation, for one of the most obvious dangers is that of identifying with the figures in the unconscious. For anyone with an unstable disposition, this may amount to a psychosis. The raving madness of the infected infant is assuaged, we should really say with caresses, for that is the meaning of Moser, by the doves of Diana. These doves form a pair, a love pair, for doves are the birds of Astarte. 329. In the philosophical sublimation or first preparation of Mercury, a Herculean task confronts the worker. The threshold is guarded by a horned beast. Naught will assuage their ferocity, save the tokens of Diana and the doves of Venus. If the fates call thee, Arcanum Hermeticae Philosophicae. The doves themselves were originally the chicks of crows. The priestesses of Ishtar were called doves, just as the priestesses of the goddess of Asia Minor were called wild doves. The dove is also the attribute of mother goddess of the Hittites, who is depicted in an obscene position. I will point out, philosophical sublimation is not going to be the external alchemy, but rather the internal, The first preparation of Mercury, very well, Mercury would be red. That is probably the base, That would probably be the house of Mercury. In that case, it is not guarded by a horned beast. I had no confrontation with a horned beast at all. But there is a level of entry that is barred, There is the understanding that you have to reach about yourself dealing with your subconscious. It requires work. You have to go back and investigate yourself, not just the things that you like, but the things about yourself that you do not like. And the easy way to identify that is what pisses you off about someone else. The thing that annoys you about someone else most often is a reflection of the thing you do not like about yourself. That is a hard thing to admit, but if you can, you kill one of those horned beasts. You open the door by breaking the barrier, by accepting about yourself that which you do not like. That is the shadow work. Now, once you have acknowledged it, you can overcome it. That is killing another one of those horned beasts. There is not a literal, physical horned beast barring your entry. I have had no contact, I had an angelic experience way back, almost 30 years ago now. I had my enlightenment experience, which had no entities. And then I had the process by which I did this, which again had no entities. And so, to me, there are no physical, literal, or even mental beasts. This is a representation of the obstacles that you must overcome, and those are internal. Back to the text. In alchemy, they represent, like all winged creatures, spirits or souls. Right? Now, this is not spirits as the spirit or the logos, but as souls of other things. Right? We can only attribute a soul to humanity. Everything else is just a spirit. I don't agree with that, but okay. Or, in technical terms, the aqua, the extracted transformative substance. 330. That is from Eleazar. The appearance of a pair of doves points to the imminent marriage of the filius regius, and to the dissolution of the opposites as a result of the union. The filius is merely infected by an evil, but the evil itself, the mad dog, is sublimated and changed into an eagle at the pleninium. Once again, shadow work is the incorporation of the thing you don't like, right? And so the filius is infected by the evil, but the evil itself, the mad dog, is sublimated and changed into an eagle, would be doing the shadow work. In the treatise of Abraham Eleazar, the lapis in its dark feminine form appears instead of the dog, and is compared to the Shulamite. In the Song of Songs, the lapis says, "But I must be like a dove." 331. That is just another reference. There is another passage in the Introitus Apartus which is relevant in this context. "If thou knowest how to moisten this dry earth with its own water, thou wilt loosen the pores of the earth, and this thief from outside will be cast out with the workers of wickedness, and the water, by an admixture of the true sulphur, will be cleansed from the leprous filth and from the superfluous dropsical fluid. And thou wilt have in thy power the fount of the Knight of Treviso, whose waters are rightfully dedicated to the maiden Diana. Worthless is this thief, armed with the malignity of arsenic, from whom the winged youth fleeth shuddering. And though the central water is as bright, yet dare he not display his most ardent," I'm changing my accent, "his most ardent love towards her, because of the snares of the thief, whose machinations are in truth unavoidable. Here may Diana be propitious to thee, who knoweth how to tame wild beasts, and whose twin doves will temper the malignity of the air with their wings, so that the youth easily entereth in through the pores, and instantly shaketh the foundations of the earth." 332, and we're going to talk. The text is corrupt here. I read Teresites. It refers to the resurrection of the lapis out of the earth, which it penetrated as the air subforium, air of the sages, one of the many allusions to the Coniunctio. The birth of the lapis has its parallel in Christ's resurrection, hence the reference to the earthquake that never happened, Matthew 28:2. And behold, there was a great earthquake. There is no record of that. And that was something that would have been recorded, and it was not. There was no darkening of the sky. There was no earthquake. There was no rending in the temple. All right, now let's talk. I was going to wait till the end of the paragraph, but we stopped already. "If you know how to moisten this dry earth with your own water, thou wilt loosen the pores of the earth, and this thief from outside will be cast out." That is doing the shadow work, right? The expunging from yourself the darkness, the workers of wickedness, by the admixture of the true sulfur. We had a whole discussion about the sulfur, that is the logos, the understanding of the change and the use of the spirit, right? Will be cleansed from the leprous filth and from the superfluous dropsical fluid. Both of those are internal alchemy. "And thou wilt have thy power, the fount of the Knight of Treviso." Now that reference I do not know. Whose waters are rightfully dedicated to the maiden Diana, right? Your waters, rightfully dedicated, doesn't even matter to who, right? Any name is the wrong name for any god. "Worthless is the thief," the thing you expel, "armed with the malignity of arsenic, a poison, from whom the winged youth fleeth shuddering. And though the central water, the flow of the spirit, is his bride, Yet dare he not display his most ardent love towards her, because of the snares of the thief. That is getting prideful, right? The central water is his bride. He dare not display, would be attaching yourself too much to the process, and that is a problem because of the snares of the thief. The snares of the thief are the virtues and the vices, both in equal measure, whose machinations are, in truth, unavoidable. Here may she be propitious to thee, who knoweth how to tame the wild beast, and whose twin doves will temper the malignity of the air with their wings, the air being the soul, and so that the youth easily entereth in through the pores, and instantly shaketh the foundations of the earth. All of that is in accordance with the things that I talk about, right? It is an allegory for the things, but it is the things. And raises up a dark cloud. But thou wilt lead the waters up, even to the brightness of the moon, and darkness that was upon the face of the deep shall be scattered by the moving spirit of the waters. The light in the dark, right? Thou will bring up the waters, right? Now, the waters go up and down. That is a thing, but that is not a thing that was recorded in many places. I don't think I've found one yet. I think we found one, but I can't remember where it was. Anyway, thus by God's command shall the light appear, and the light does indeed appear. 333, Philathea. Right, now, we have talked several times. There is, in the Ancient Lore playlist, The Secret of the Golden Flower, the translation of which Mr. Jung did the introduction to. That flower is this light that appears. If you are interested, we have read it. It is evident that this passage is a variation on the theme of the preceding text. Instead of the infant hermaphrodite, we have the winged youth. A much, much better way to show that. Whose bride is the fountain of Diana, Luna as a nymph. The parallel to the mad dog is the thief, or ne'er-do-well, who is armed with the malignity of arsenic. His malignity is assuaged by the wings of the doves, just as the dog's rabies was. The wings of the dove of light and the dove of darkness, the as above and the as below. The youth's wings are a token of his aerial nature. He is a pneuma that penetrates through the pores of the earth and activates it, which means nothing less than the conumbium of the living spirit with the dry virgin earth, or of the wind with the waters dedicated to the maiden Diana. Remember, you are a representative of earth. That is a vitally important thing in this particular part, right? You do move the pneuma. That is another representative of the logos. Penetrates through the pores of the earth and activates it, which means nothing less than the living spirit, the logos, with the dry virgin earth is you, not necessarily the planet. Although you can connect those powers, you can be that conduit. The winged youth is described as the spirit moving over the waters. Again, that is the logos as well. And this may be a reference not only to Genesis, but to the angel that troubled the pool of Bethesda. That was an understanding. Whether it was correct or not is definitely up for debate. 334. That is from John 5. All right. His enemy, the thief, who lies in wait for him, is, as we are told earlier, the outward-burning vaporous sulfur. In other words, sulfur vulgi, who is armed with the evil spirit, the devil, or who is held captive by him in hell. 335. He has the key to the infernal prison house where sulfur lies bound. It is important to note that in the Old Testament there is no hell. There is not. There is the land of the dead. It is called Sheol in the terminology, but it was where everybody went, and there was no eternal punishment intrinsic to it at all. There was also not a heaven that people went to. There was the heaven that God resided in, but it was not the same place that is in the New Testament at all. Hell and heaven, as described in the New Testament, do not comport at all with the Jewish understanding. And thus is the equivalent of the dog that choked in the water. That the dog and thief are identical is clear from the remark that Diana knows how to tame wild beasts. Again, internal reflection. The two doves do in fact turn out to be the pair of lovers who appeared in the love story of Diana and the shepherd Endymion. This legend originally referred to Selene. The appearance of Diana necessarily brings with it her hunting animal, the dog, who represents her dark side. Her darkness shows itself in the fact that she is also a goddess of destruction and death, whose arrows never miss. She changed the hunter Actaeon, when he secretly watched her bathing, into a stag, and his own hounds, not recognizing him, thereupon tore him to pieces. This myth may have given rise first to the designation of the lapis as Cervus fugitivus, the fugitive stag. 336. Cervus fugitivus, the fugitive slave, is more common. Cervus appears in Agrippa von Nettensheim. Do not pay any attention to it, therefore. We have done part of the works of Agrippa. There is nothing of value contained within that book. Foolish mysteries of this art and empty riddles of the green lion, the fugitive heart. There is a picture of Diana and Actaeon on the title page of the Museum Hermetica, reproduced in Bernoulli, spiritual development as reflected in alchemy. In the table of figures in Manger, the stag appears as the emblem of Mahomet Philosophus. It is the symbol of self-rejuvenation in Honorius of Autun, Sermo in Epiphania Domini, where it is said that the stag, when he has swallowed a poisonous snake, drinks water, that he may eject the poison and then cast his horns in his hair, and so make new. We likewise should put aside the horns of pride and hair of worldly superfluity. In the legend of the Grail, it is related that Christ sometimes appeared to his disciples as a white stag with 4 lions, the 4 evangelists. See the Nature of Dreams, paragraph 559. Here, too, it is stated that the stag can renew itself. Le Saint Graal, Ruland, mentions only that cervicule spiritus is a bone in the heart of the stag. Dom Pernety says of the cerveau encore de souffle, c'est la maturise de philosophe, the livres des secrets de nature. Says, the stag is a well-known beast which renews itself when it feels it is growing old and weak. No, it does not. Right? Not in reality, not in the literal world. Right? They can die of old age. It is just extremely unlikely because of disease and predators. It goes to an anthill and digs at the foot thereof and brings forth thence a serpent, on which it tramples with its feet and afterwards eats. Right? Got to be allegory. Snakes murder. Deer do eat meat. Right? They are mainly herbivorous, but if they come across a fish upon the bank, somehow it does happen, they will eat it. That is something that is documented. They will also eat snakes. That is something else that is documented. Right? This is a thing that does happen. The other parts of it, not so much. Right? Eating the wrong snake and then digging up the anthill, right? There is no corroboration for that. It then swells up and so renews itself, wherefore it lives for 900 years, as we find in Scripture. Yeah, okay. And then to the rabbit dog. And I mean, as an allegory, the things work. Not that 900 years part, most of the rest of it. And then to the rabbit dog, who is none other than the vindictive and treacherous aspect of Diana as the new moon, the void. The parable we discussed in the chapter on sulfur likewise contains the motif of the surprise in the bath. But there, it is Helios himself who espies her, and the relationship is a brother-sister incest that ends with their both being drowned. This catastrophe is inherent in the incest. For, through the incest, the royal pair is produced after animals have been killed or have killed one another. 337. Since a psychic transformation is involved, the obscure passage in the Nicene hymn describing the sufferings of the soul might be relevant here. The soul, veiled in the form of a stag, wearies, overpowered by the pains of death. But the text is so uncertain that it has little documentary value. The animals, dragon, lion, snake, etc., stand for evil passions that finally take the form of incest. They are destroyed by their own ravenous nature, just as are Sol and Luna, whose supreme desire culminates, apparently, in incest. No! Like, it is the joining together of forces, not literal people. It is not incestuous for the light and the dark to meet. But since all that passes is but a parable, incest, as we have said before, is nothing but a preliminary form of the unitio oppositorium. 338. See Psychology of the Transference. Out of chaos, darkness, and wickedness, there arises up a new light once death has atoned for the unavoidable machinations of the evil one. That is a not literal death. Right? There has been no death that atones for the machinations of the evil one. There has been no death that forgave you from sin. There has been no death required for you to be forgiven from sin. And that is going to bring us to the end of the dog. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I do have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. Once again, I feel like I have walked my way through this with enough depth that you should be able to follow along with what I'm saying, especially if you have been here from the beginning of this particular study. This is meat, right? There is meat in here. His understanding of it is not quite correct, but it is close, and he is mostly just relaying other people's knowledge. Some of that is useless. See Agrippa. There was nothing in Agrippa that I found useful at all. But, I found more use from both Levi and from Crowley than I did from Agrippa. And neither one of them had any value either. So, this, however, is meat, right? This is at least the ability to get to the understanding. This is at least the ground that you need to walk upon to get there. Now, most of his explanations for it is not quite correct, but that was due to a misunderstanding of the primary, the singular focus is primarily misunderstood. If you do not have the understanding of the logos and the combination of the light and the dark forces within yourself, this does not read well. But if you do, it is apparent what they were talking about, and hopefully I have been able to relay that to you, because to me it is quite obvious. All of these references, not all of them, but most of them, are telling you the same thing in a slightly different way under their understanding. There is nothing wrong with that. Looking back through the lens of history, we can add to it. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment, whether you agree or disagree with anything that was stated. Put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership, picking up a copy of my book where I do describe all of this stuff, or consulting me directly through the link provided down below. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.